I would now like to invite Shri Arun Shourie to come and address the audience.
Respected President and my dear friends, all of us are here today to hear the President, and therefore I will be brief. And to be even briefer, I will read what I typed on the flight yesterday on remembering Dhirubhai. Sir, my acquaintance with Dhirubhai went through an almost 180-degree turn over the years. I first learnt about him through the articles of my colleague S. Gurumurthy in the Indian Express. The point of most of those articles was that Reliance had done something in excess of what it had been licensed to do. And it had been given some production capacity, it had installed more, it was then producing beyond the capacity. This was the main brunt of those articles. Most of us today would say that those restrictions and conditions should not have been there in the first place, and that those restrictions and regulations were what were holding the country back at that time and held it back for almost 2 decades. And that the Dhirubhais are to be thanked not once, but twice over. First, they set up world-class companies and facilities in spite of those regulations, and thus laid the foundations for the growth all of us claim credit for today. And second, that by exceeding the limits in which those restrictions sought to impound them, they helped create the case for scrapping those regulations, they helped make the case for reforms. From those days of contention to the day Reliance won the bid for IPCL was the 180-degree turn. The price per share of that company had been between 100 to 120 rupees at that time. Dhirubhai bid rupees 231 per share. He won. His bid was almost twice that of the nearest rival, the IOC. Government, and as time will show, the country were the immediate and huge gainers. But there had been unbelievable pressures throughout to disqualify Reliance from the bidding process completely. The position that eventually prevailed within the government was that the cabinet had earlier settled guidelines for qualifying and disqualifying bidders. If Reliance fell afoul of those guidelines, it must be disqualified no matter what. If it did not, as it did not, it must be allowed to bid no matter what. As simple as anything can be. But those who remember their Clausewitz will remember his maxim, just because a thing is simple does not mean it is easy. The pressures brought not just these transactions, they brought almost the whole disinvestment program of the government to a halt. Throughout this period, Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani never contacted me. But obviously, he was getting to know what was going on. For he had sources in places where mere journalists like me don't even know there are places. The evening the result was announced, he rang up. Anil handed him the phone. His voice was choked with emotion. I know what you have been put through. Anyone else would have given up. He said many things. I will never forget. I don't care about business. I care about relationship. No one in my family will forget. He was so emotional at that moment. Actually, I hadn't realized that the contest had meant that much to him. I had been merely implementing government policy. So, over the years, my acquaintance with him, confined to the rare meeting, had turned 180 degrees. In part, as I said, for an intellectual reason, we had all got convinced that persons like him, and especially he, had done the country great service. They had put up world-class facilities in India in spite of the shackles by which governments had sought to confine them. In part because I had got to meet him a few times. He was always direct. He was full of ideas about what the country could do if only it would be allowed to do it. And what is a journalist staple, he was always full of information. And even more delicious, he was full of anecdotes. But I looked forward to those rare meetings for another reason. the reason I look forward to this day to meeting self-made men, that is, to garner their guru mantras. And I always came back with a nugget or two. Let me give you an example, and I'll end with that. Once by coincidence, I met him soon after Rupert Murdoch had called on him. I asked him what they had talked about. I asked him, Dhirubhai said, in Delhi, whom did you meet? Murdoch said, I met the Prime Minister, the Information Minister, the Finance Minister, the Trade Minister. He narrated the names of many high-ups. You have met all the right people, I told him. Dhirubhai said, next time you come to India, you must spare time and meet the wrong people also. And he named a few persons, I won't name them. And he laughed. He said, I always meet the wrong people also. You see, they can stop what you want to get done. And that's a guru mantra. Now, and I can testify from personal experience that one must follow that mantra. Because I face the cost of not following it every day as I try to implement the government's decisions on disinvestment. That is why, Mr. President, in my mind, associated with the memory of Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani is also a lasting regret. I had always wanted to do a series of TV programs in which these self-made men would talk about the maxims they had distilled from life, from daring the world, from grappling with great odds, from building great empires and institutions, from moving millions, from retaining what they had acquired or losing it all. That would be the true text of the Indian way of management. I never got a sponsor. And so many of the small number from the last 50 years who would have fit that category have gone, one by one. Sir, there are many things to learn from Dhirubhai and his memory: scale, focus, execution, innovation in financial instruments, the faith he placed in shareholders, the faith they reposed in him. But all that and more of what we can learn from Dhirubhai some other day. Today, we are all here to learn from the President. Thank you.